He turned off the music and closed the distance. The moment the beat died and the room was swallowed by stillness, every breath between us became a confession. I felt it. The sudden drop in temperature, the electric charge of eyes locking. I hadn't expected tonight to shift like this. The playlist had been our soundtrack, low bass, warm vocals, a slow rhythm that painted everything in amber light. But then he reached out with one finger and made the music vanish. We were thrust into a quieter world, where what was unspoken had more weight. From where I stood, I saw him lean back on the arm of the couch, the cushions sighing under his weight. His silhouette was dark but familiar, lit by the soft glow of a single lamp. The air felt thick. I could hear the shallow catch of my own breathing, feel the faint pulse at my throat as adrenaline trickled in. Every nerve in me sharpened. My mind raced. What is he doing? Why now? It wasn't planned. Not explicitly. But I'd seen that look before. Unsettled, hungry, cautious. A look that said he wanted to cross a line he'd never named. He studied me, his gaze wandering over shapes and shadows. My heart thumped, my pulse felt loud. My skin tingled as though waiting. Every fiber of me leaned forward, though my legs wouldn't move. The quiet made it worse. The silence pressed in, a weight between us. I tried to steady myself. My throat was dry, my tongue thick. I glanced at the door, at the empty glass on the coffee table, at the creased sheets of the couch cover. In that room, things that had been casual touches, glances, jokes, felt like loaded weapons now. He shifted and I felt the couch dip. He closed a little bit of space between us. I swallowed. My voice caught. I wanted to speak, to break the silence with something safe, but the seconds stretched and morphed. I didn't know where to start. My internal monologue, a mixture of caution and urgency, flickered. If I lean closer, is this too fast? If I pull back, will he let me? The tension was like a breath held too long, like a cord suspended in midair before its fall. He lifted a hand slowly, no sudden moves, and let his fingers trail toward me. I froze, halfway between yearning and retreat. The quiet held its breath with me. As he extended that hand, the air between us crackled. The inches closed, the silence deepened. I wanted to turn away, but my body betrayed me. Every instinct whispered yes. Every rational thought warned me. And then, before I could decide, he pressed his fingers to my wrist. My pulse jumped. His touch was light, deliberate, almost teasing, almost a test. I felt the warmth of his skin through my blouse, the faint vibration under his fingertips. The room shrank, time slowed. I held my breath. I knew in that moment that nothing would ever be the same. His fingers moved so slowly it almost felt like a hallucination. Like maybe I had imagined the touch, dreamt the heat crawling across my skin. But it was real. I felt every fraction of movement, every shift of pressure. He traced the inside of my forearm like it was a sentence he was trying to memorize. And God, my body read every word like poetry. I didn't look at him. I couldn't. My eyes were fixed on some vague spot near the corner of the coffee table, pretending to be somewhere safer. But I wasn't safe. Not anymore. My skin felt electric under his hand. I knew that if I moved, if I even twitched, I would give myself away. That I wanted this. That I had wanted it for longer than I'd ever admitted. We weren't supposed to get here. He was my closest friend's older brother. The one who always drove us home after parties, who always offered water before wine, who teased me in a way that felt almost protective. He was the guy who lingered in the kitchen at family barbecues, who knew when to look away and when to look too long. And I'd never let myself ask why I noticed that. Why I remembered the way he stood behind me while helping with dishes, his breath close to my neck. Why I kept thinking about the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled at her, but flickered differently when they landed on me. Now that look had returned, richer, slower, unmistakable. His fingers were at the crease of my elbow now, and I finally turned to him. It was a mistake. His eyes were already waiting, dark, focused, patient, like he'd been watching me for a long time and had only just decided to act. "I can stop," he said, voice quiet. The moment shattered me. He gave me the out, but his voice said something else entirely. It was steady but laced with something deeper, like he wanted me to say yes but expected me to say no. I swallowed hard. I should have stopped it. There were rules, weren't there? But rules didn't feel real in that room. Not with that silence, that lighting, that hand. I didn't answer. Instead, I let my fingers drift toward his. Just barely, enough to let them brush. That was all he needed. His touch changed. Less testing now, more certain. His hand moved upward, gliding to my shoulder, thumb grazing the hollow of my collarbone like it had always belonged there. A sound escaped my throat. A small, involuntary breath, and he heard it. He felt it. That was the moment I knew we'd both stopped pretending. I whispered, "This is..." But the words never finished. He leaned in slightly, head tilted, as if to listen closer. As if to pull the words out of me with nothing but nearness. The air between us was trembling. We were standing at the edge of something we couldn't take back. And then, just when I thought he might lean in, might finally close the gap and end this terrible, beautiful waiting, his phone buzzed. A loud, vibrating sound against the quiet that cut through us like a cold blade. He didn't move. Just looked at me. We both froze. And on the screen, face down, glowing, was her name. My best friend. Her name still glowed from the phone screen. A sharp reminder that we weren't alone in this story. That someone else lived in the center of his life. Someone who trusted me. Someone who would never imagine this. But he didn't flinch. Didn't glance down. He just turned the phone over, face down again, sealing her out of the moment like a secret being buried. Then he said my name. Not casually. Not like someone calling across a room. He said it like a confession, like he had practiced the sound in his mouth 100 times in silence and now, finally, gave himself permission to speak it aloud. I stopped breathing. His hand came up behind my neck, not forceful, not rushed. Just the slow glide of fingers through my hair, the brush of his palm against the base of my skull. Gentle but sure. Every nerve in my body leaned toward him, pulled by something too old, too deep to name. "I've tried not to think about this," he murmured, voice husky but low. "But I can't unsee it anymore. The way you look at me when you think no one notices. The way you go quiet when we're alone." I closed my eyes. His breath was at my temple now, warm and patient. I could feel the ghost of a kiss that hadn't landed yet, hovering somewhere just above my cheek. "I never meant for this to happen," I whispered. "I know," he said. Neither did I. But still his hand stayed. Still I didn't move away. And the silence between us, it wasn't innocent anymore. It pulsed. "I don't want to hurt her," I said, even though we already had. He nodded slowly. "I don't either. But I can't lie anymore." There was no anger in his voice. No guilt either. Just that quiet clarity of someone who had fought something long enough and finally surrendered to it. The lamp cast golden light across his jawline, the soft curve of his mouth. He was too close, and I didn't have the strength to pretend he wasn't everything I'd secretly craved. My chest ached from holding it in weeks, months, maybe years of pretending I didn't feel this heat whenever he stood near me. Now that it was here, now that I could touch him, I wasn't sure I remembered how to say no. He traced the line of my jaw with his knuckles. Slowly, reverently. "I think about you all the time," he whispered. "When she talks about you, when you text her, when you come over with that look in your eyes like you know exactly how close we are to losing control." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Just heat. Just breath. I should have been disgusted. Or terrified. But I was only trembling. Because he wasn't wrong. I had noticed his glances. The ones that lingered. The ones that darkened. I had felt the tension too many times to pretend this was just a sudden mistake. He leaned in. Just slightly. His nose brushed mine. I felt his hesitation. Not nervous, deliberate. Like he wanted to make sure I had every second to pull away. I didn't. And then finally he kissed me. Soft. Like the first drop of rain before a storm. The contact lit something behind my ribs, hot and dangerous. My hands moved on their own, one resting on his chest, the other curling at the back of his neck, anchoring myself because the floor felt like it was tilting. It was everything I thought it would be. And worse. Because it felt right. Because it tasted like inevitability. But just as I leaned in deeper, just as I felt him part his lips against mine, the front door handle turned, and her voice called out, "Hey, I forgot my charger." We jumped apart so fast it was clumsy, chaotic. I knocked my glass off the coffee table. It hit the rug with a muted thud, the sound too soft to betray us, but it felt deafening in my chest. His hand lingered an inch away from mine before he pulled it back, flexing his fingers like they still remembered the feel of me. His lips were parted. Not from surprise, from wanting. From the echo of a kiss that hadn't fully left his mouth. I was still trembling. Her keys jingled. The sound of the door unlocking was absurdly normal, absurdly cruel. I looked at him, eyes wide. "What do we do?" was written all over my face. His jaw clenched. For a split second I saw something flash across his face. Fear? Guilt? No. It wasn't either of those. It was resignation. Like he already knew this wasn't going to stay hidden forever. The door creaked open. "Hey, are you still?" "Oh." Her voice drifted from the entryway, casual and chirpy. "There you are." I turned to see her stepping inside, purse still over one shoulder, her smile easy and unsuspecting. Her hair was a little windblown, her cheeks pink from the cool night air. And in that moment I hated myself for how beautiful she looked. How good she was. How much she trusted me. My heart pounded so hard it was difficult to breathe. "I left my charger upstairs, I think," she said, already moving past us. I nodded too quickly. "Yeah, of course. It's probably near the guest bed." My voice was higher than usual. Too rehearsed. And I didn't dare look at her for more than a second. But she didn't notice. Why would she? Behind me I felt him shift, rising from the couch, brushing past my shoulder with a kind of forced nonchalance. "You want tea or anything?" he asked, his voice hoarse but casual. She shook her head, smiling. "Nah, I'm good. I just need to grab it and go. I've got an early shift." She disappeared down the hallway. He turned to me then briefly. Just a glance. But it said everything. His eyes weren't panicked. They were focused. Like the moment hadn't broken something, just buried it deeper. I pressed my palms against my jeans to keep them from shaking. We stood in the center of the living room, breathing like we'd both just run a mile. The heat of his body was still wrapped around me, even with the distance. And the room felt tainted, like the walls themselves had absorbed our tension, our silence, our sin. I heard her upstairs, her footsteps light. A door opening. Drawers sliding. No urgency. No suspicion. I turned to him, lips parted, wanting to say something, anything, but I couldn't find the words. He stepped closer. Not enough to touch. Just enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off of him again. He leaned in, lips near my ear. "This doesn't end here," he whispered. My stomach flipped. "After she leaves," he added. "Come back inside." I stared at him. My mind screamed no. But my body was already betraying me. My skin still buzzed from his mouth. My chest ached where his hands had rested. I should have left. Should have followed her out, laughed at nothing, pretended the evening had been quiet and uneventful. But the second she walked out that door, I knew I'd turn back. The front door shut with a soft click. And suddenly the house didn't feel like a home anymore. Felt like a confession booth. A fever dream. A place where lines weren't just crossed, they were erased. I stood frozen, jacket still clutched around me, but everything inside had already unraveled. I could feel my pulse in my ears, in my throat, between my legs. The silence wasn't quiet anymore. It was expectant. He moved toward me. No hesitation. No apology. He didn't say a word. Just slid his fingers beneath my collar and let the jacket fall. It slipped down my arms like it had weight. Like it knew the moment it touched the floor, everything would change. When it landed in a soft heap at my feet, I heard it like a challenge. I should have spoken. I should have said something smart or moral or distant. But all I could do was stare at him, at the way his eyes darkened with every second of my silence. His hand came up again, fingertips brushing my bare shoulder. "You're shaking," he whispered. "I know. Cold." "No." He smiled faintly, the corner of his mouth lifting just enough to make my stomach twist. "Then stay." He didn't wait for a reply. He turned and walked down the hall, slow, deliberate. Each step echoing like a question. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. I followed. Not because I was sure of anything, but because the alternative, walking away pretending none of this had touched me, felt impossible. I didn't want safety. I wanted the fire. The risk. The thing I wasn't supposed to want. His bedroom door was open but dim. Just one lamp on the dresser, its light casting long shadows across the walls. The bed was unmade, sheets wrinkled and soft-looking, like someone had tossed in them recently. Restless, maybe. Waiting. He stood by the window watching me. His arms were crossed loosely. His head tilted slightly to the side like he couldn't believe I was really there. Like I was something he'd imagined too vividly too often. "Do you ever think about it?" he asked softly. I blinked. "Think about what?" "Her," he said almost gently. "Walking in. Catching us. Saying my name like it means something." His words hit like a shockwave. My mouth went dry. He didn't say it with malice. It wasn't a threat. It was a confession, one that exposed a darker part of him. And shamefully a darker part of me. I swallowed hard. "Why would you say that?" He shrugged, but his eyes didn't leave mine. "Because I know you've thought about it too." He was right. And it made me dizzy with heat. With shame. With something far more dangerous. I stepped inside the room. Quietly. Slowly. Every inch of me felt raw. Like his gaze had peeled back a layer I didn't know I was hiding. "You don't know me," I whispered. He smiled just enough to make my skin burn. "I know exactly who you are when you're with her. And I've spent too long pretending I didn't see the way you watch me." The air between us pulsed again. Like gravity had turned sideways. And then, without warning, he walked up to me. Took my wrist again. Pressed my hand to his chest, over his heartbeat. "This isn't about her anymore," he said. "This is about you. And how long you've been pretending you don't want this." I couldn't answer. Because he was right again. I'd wanted this in quiet, secret ways. In the way I'd memorized the slope of his shoulders from across the room. In the way I lingered at their house when I didn't have to. In the way my skin lit up when he looked at me like I wasn't supposed to matter, but I did. And now my hand was on his heart. And I didn't pull it away. "Tell me to stop." His voice was a breath against my lips, so quiet it barely counted as sound. But it rang in me like a dare. Like a lifeline. Like a final door left unlocked. I opened my mouth. The word stop sat there heavy and ready. But it didn't move. It just hovered at the edge of my tongue. Wrapped in guilt and want and confusion. He didn't rush me. His forehead rested against mine, his breath warm and steady. One of his hands moved slowly up my spine, just enough to make me feel it. A trail of heat, a silent question. His other hand held mine over his chest, like he was asking me to listen to the truth of him, the rhythm of what he wasn't saying. I tried to think. To rewind. To find the moment we could have gone a different way. But the truth was I didn't want to. Not anymore. Because this wasn't just a kiss or a room, or a mistake waiting to happen. This was years of stolen glances and layered meanings and unspoken tension collapsing into one long-held breath finally being released. I closed my eyes. He didn't move until I whispered, "Don't stop." And then something in him broke open. His hand slipped behind my neck again, his mouth catching mine like it had been waiting too long, too patiently, for this exact moment. It wasn't hurried. It wasn't careful either. It was certain. Like the kind of kiss that doesn't ask for permission because it already knows the answer. My hands were in his hair before I realized they'd moved. His body pressed against mine, every inch of him answering questions I hadn't even asked yet. The tension between us wasn't tight anymore. It was unraveling. Slowly. Beautifully. Painfully. He pulled back just enough to look at me. "Do you know what you're doing?" he asked. "No," I whispered. "But I know what I want." He exhaled like that was all he needed to hear. And then he picked me up, gently like I was fragile like this whole moment was. He laid me back on the bed, not with urgency but reverence. Like he wanted to remember every second. The sheets were warm from the lamp. The light touched his shoulders as he hovered above me, casting soft shadows that made the room feel even smaller, closer. More dangerous. He looked at me like he wanted to devour something he wasn't sure he was allowed to touch. Like this moment wasn't a triumph, but a kind of surrender. His hand found my thigh. Slid slowly, deliberately. My whole body tensed, then melted. My back arched instinctively, like every nerve had been waiting to be noticed. I gasped. He paused. "Too much." "No," I said quickly. "Not even close." And that was all it took. The rest happened in waves. A touch that made me forget my name. A breath that made me remember every time he'd almost done this but hadn't. A moment where our mouths met like we were starving. And through it all, his eyes watching me, checking me, reading me. I felt exposed. Not just physically, emotionally. Like every buried thought I'd had about him was finally painfully out in the open. But I didn't want to hide anymore. Not when his mouth trailed down my throat like a secret. Not when his hands held me like I was something precious and dangerous all at once. And then just when it felt like I might fall completely into him, lose every thread of thought. He stopped. Just stopped. Hovering above me, breathing hard. Eyes searching mine like he was trying to find something buried deep inside. "I need you to say it," he said. "One more time." I stared at him, chest rising and falling. "Say what?" "That you want this. Not just because it feels good. Not just because she's not here. But because it's me." And in that moment there was only truth. "I want you," I said. "I think I always have." His eyes closed like those words were a kind of relief. But then somewhere deep in the hallway, the sound of keys, the front door, a voice. She was back. She was just outside the door. Her voice casual and warm. Like this was any other night. Like nothing inside this room had changed. Like she wasn't seconds away from seeing the truth unfold in the worst possible way. My heart stopped. He was still above me, breathing hard, his weight braced on his forearms, our bodies close enough that the heat between us still pulsed, but everything had shifted. The fire was still there, but fear had slipped in beside it, uninvited. His eyes locked on mine, and for the first time I saw panic. Not regret. Not shame. Just the wild, silent panic of someone who hadn't planned for reality to walk back through the door. I sat up fast, clutching the sheet like armor, my breath trapped somewhere between my ribs and my throat. He moved too, grabbing a hoodie off the chair, tossing it to me like instinct. The door handle rattled. "Hey, are you in here?" she called again. I threw the hoodie over my head just in time. My hair caught, my arms fumbled, but I got it on. I was shaking. Not from what we'd done, but from what we'd almost been caught doing. He stepped toward the door. "Yeah, I'm here," he said, his voice suddenly casual. Too casual. It cracked at the edges. She pushed the door open halfway and peeked inside. "Oh hey," she said, eyes sweeping the room. "Have you seen my phone? I think I dropped it earlier." He turned his back to me slightly, blocking her view, subtle but intentional. "Probably on the couch," he said. "I'll help you look." She stepped fully into the room. I held my breath. "Wait," she said, tilting her head. "Is someone here?" I panicked. "Just me," I called out, voice light, heart racing. "I came back to grab my charger too." "Yours was still upstairs, right?" She smiled. "Right. Ugh, we're a mess tonight." She laughed. And I wanted to cry. Because I'd never felt more divided, between who I had been before that night, and who I was now. Between loyalty and longing. Between safety and something far more dangerous. She walked over to the nightstand, grabbed her phone and gave him a quick kiss on the cheek. Easy, trusting, innocent. "I'll text you when I get home," she said. "You're still the best big brother/bodyguard ever." He nodded, said something I couldn't hear. She turned to me. "Night, babe." I waved, barely holding it together. "Night." And then she was gone again. The silence returned like a slap. He closed the door slowly, then turned to me. His face was unreadable. "I'm sorry," he said. I nodded, even though I didn't know what part he meant. The silence stretched between us, no longer hot and heavy but raw, fragile. I sat on the edge of the bed, hoodie draped over my knees, hands knotted together. "I don't think I can go back to pretending," I whispered. He walked over to me, kneeled. "Neither can I." His hand reached for mine, fingers brushing lightly, hesitantly. And then, softer than before, almost broken. "But what happens next? That's not just up to me." The room was quiet now, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that came after something irreversible. The kind that clung to the walls, thick with everything we hadn't said. His fingers were still laced with mine, but even that felt like a question. He sat across from me, cross-legged on the floor, like we were both children who had broken something too valuable to fix. Except it wasn't a vase or a rule, it was trust. Hers. Mine. His. "What do we do now?" I asked, barely above a whisper. He didn't answer right away. Just ran his thumb along the inside of my wrist like it grounded him, like if he stopped touching me, we might both vanish into guilt. I don't know, he said finally. But I know I don't want this to be the end. I looked at him, really looked. There was something in his face I hadn't seen before. Vulnerability. Not just the raw kind that came from being caught, or from the wreckage we built together, but the kind that came from wanting something he didn't think he deserved, and still asking for it anyway. I should hate you, I said. I should hate me. He didn't flinch. But you don't, he said quietly. No, I whispered. I don't. Because in all the chaos, something else had taken root. Something I'd never planned for: honesty. A terrible, beautiful truth neither of us could keep buried anymore. I moved closer. Not to kiss him. Not to forget. But to be near the one person who understood how impossible this night had been. His head dropped to my shoulder. I let it rest there, feeling the weight of him, not just his body but everything we carried now. The wanting. The regret. The ache. I'm going to tell her, he said suddenly. I froze. What? I can't lie to her anymore. Not about this. Not about how I feel. About you. My chest tightened. You think that'll make it better? No, he said. But at least it'll be real. Tears welled in my eyes, not from sadness. From relief. From terror. From the knowledge that the fire we started wouldn't go out just because we closed the door behind it. I didn't know what the future looked like. I didn't know if we'd ever be together in the light. But I knew this. I wouldn't go back to pretending. I left his room an hour later. The hallway felt longer than before, like every step was a decision. And as I closed the front door behind me, the night air wrapped around me like a second skin. Cold. Clear. Honest.